Welcome to my Stirling single. This is part 23, painting the frames without removing the driving wheels. The first thing to do though was to remove the keeper plates or horn stays from the horn blocks, and then give every bit of the frames a really good clean with panel wipe. And once again, this panel wipe or naphtha evaporates incredibly quickly. And also one more time a health and safety warning. Always do this in a very well ventilated area. After carefully painting the now accessible rear part of the frames, using Phoenix Precision Paints, Great Northern Railways, chocolate brown, it's currently not looking too brilliant, but as this excellent paint dries, it flattens out. When the paint has dried, I'm going to paint the copper piping black. I'll leave the pipe in natural copper in the cab, but where it connects to the injector externally, I'm going to paint it black, after first painting the copper piping with etch primer. In this part of the clip, I'm just smoothing out some of the paint using the paintbrush, and in a few hours when this paint's dried, it should look really well. Most of this area is behind the rear wheel anyway. Here you see me painting the part of the frames that's behind the crosshead. I'm taking my time with this and making sure that the paint goes on properly and that I don't get paint where it shouldn't be. And now it's time to paint the front part of the frames. I'm using slightly less paint on the vertical part because I don't want it to run. This is quite a tricky bit, maybe I should use masking tape, but painting very tricky areas like this is possibly the only excitement I get in my life these days. Well, apart from buying a 4.5-inch scale traction engine. Here's a shot for all the painting enthusiasts. It's called the paint drying on the frames, in real time. I'm stalling really because now comes the fun part. I have to paint behind the driving wheels. I thought long and hard about this, but the more I looked at the job, the less I wanted to remove and disturb the driving wheels. So I cleaned up the part of the frames behind the driving wheels using some panel wipe. I'm using a special paintbrush for this job. When you look at it from one angle, it's a wide brush, and from another angle, it's narrow, which is ideal for applying the paint through the spokes onto the frames. As you can see, I've got a lot of brown paint on the spokes of the wheel, but by using a cloth soaked in panel wipe, it's very easy to remove this paint. After I painted this side, it suddenly occurred to me it would be a better idea to rotate the wheel and just use the area between two of the spokes for the paintbrush. I can't say I've ever done anything like this ever before. But now the frames at this side behind the wheel are painted, all I'm having to do is remove the paint from the spokes, and that's it. It's a lot quicker than removing the motion. Because of the design of this locomotive with its very large splashes that cover most of the driving wheel, I really didn't need to paint the frames behind the wheels, but I couldn't live with that. It would have always bothered me. And now the entire part of the frame at this side is now Great Northern Railway chocolate brown. And here's the story so far. This is definitely a single wheeler now. It's now the little known Stirling unicycle. Every time I looked at this engine sat on the shelf in my workshop, I thought, how am I going to paint the frames behind the wheels? So now you know. It's time now to paint the frames at the other side, so turn the engine round on the bench. As I mentioned earlier, I painted the frames at this side just through a couple of the spokes. So instead of having a small amount of paint on every spoke, I just had quite a lot of brown paint on about 2 or 3 of them. And in this clip, as before, I'm removing the brown paint with a cloth soaked in panel wipe. Just as a point of interest, if you watch these videos regularly, you will notice that I always use the same type of cloths. These cloths are made from a cotton material and started out life as curtain lining. When I was a computer engineer, I used to visit many companies, and one of the companies that I used to service just happened to make curtains. One day I was in the factory downstairs, talking to the maintenance man, and we got talking about things mechanical, and in no time at all, we were talking about steam engines, and he said to me, "What do you use for wipers?" I didn't quite know what he meant. In fact, I said to him, "Well, I just moved the lever on the steering wheel." Then he explained what he meant by wipers. He meant rags. Normally I would use old t-shirts and bits of underwear, but from that day on, things took on a very upward turn. The curtain lining came into the factory on big rolls, and these were cut to length on a special machine. It was part of his job to dispose of the end of rolls, and he gave me lots of them. And I still have quite a lot of them left. They're on a high shelf in the workshop. In this clip I'm degreasing the entire wheel with some panel wipe and one of these cloths. If you're painting something, it's never a good idea to paint over grease, grit, dust and grime. And now it's painting time once again. This is a tin of Phoenix Precision Paints Great Northern Railway Loco Green. And as with all of the Phoenix range of paints, it's brilliant stuff to use. This tin's been on the shelf for quite a while, so I gave it a really thorough stirring up for a lot longer than shown on the video, and this is at high speed too. Quite soon the paint in the tin took on a very different appearance and it was ready to use. I'm going to use the same paintbrush as I used on the brown paint. The wheel is clean and off we go. The wheel castings for this locomotive have been left quite rough. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Because of the rough as-cast surface finish of the wheel, I noticed that the paint isn't chipped. The only damage to the paint is around the outer edge. And this damage is where the brake fittings have been rubbing on the wheel. The brake gear on this engine is a bit peculiar. The twin pull rods for the brake shoes go at each side of the wheel. When I first got this engine, the brakes weren't fitted to it, and they still aren't. But I did try a dummy run to see how they fitted, and I noticed that at the front part of the wheel, around the edge, the rods were too close to the wheel, hence the wear on the rim. When I finally refit the braking system, I will rectify this problem. As you can see by the spokes, I'm applying quite a thick layer of paint, much thicker than it would be if I was spraying it, and this fills in some of the depressions in the spokes. When I paint model steam engines or anything else small using a paintbrush, I always paint what I term on the drip. And what that means is I like to keep the paint very fluid and very liquid, but also very close to running. And for that reason, where possible, I like to paint things in a horizontal mode. I think that's enough painting for now. I'm all painted out. I'd just like to say, stay safe, stay well. Thanks for watching and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website. Click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you will find it very easy to find other videos that you may like to watch.